Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first of the DCMN SCALEup online events. I think this is an event that a lot of our Berlin counterparts know is usually held in the office in Berlin. And I think this online format is great because it allows us to be able to speak to voices around the globe, supporting different industries and really share our learnings. So today I'd like to welcome Matt, who is he's head of brand marketing at Yoco, which is one of the leading payments providers for small business in South Africa. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Natasha.
So I'm just going to give a bit of context, Matt, before I start speaking to giving you a few questions. But just for all of you that are on the call, please use the Q&A button at the bottom just to be able to ask questions as you think of them as they come up in conversation, and we'll leave some time at the end just to try and pick a few of those for Matt to respond to. I think, Matt, before we start, there are a few clients and team members from outside of South Africa. So just to give a little bit of context. I think what's quite interesting from a South African perspective is that obviously everyone has been affected by the virus, but I think from a South African perspective, we did see a very swift reaction from governments, really both in terms of personal freedoms as well as commerce, in terms of the amount of stringent measures that were in place. There was a very severe limitation in terms of what was deemed as an essential items and what businesses were allowed to transact over this time. And I think, when we take a look at it, we certainly have felt that the sector that was maybe one of the worst impacted was the small business category. And I think when we look at small business in South Africa, one of the issues that small businesses had is that there isn't a lot of data and information around available to be able to contextualize what the scale of the market is. And as such, they're even more vulnerable over this time because they really don't have the data to be able to have someone to champion their cause. And yep. I think that was one of the things that really stood out for me when in dealing with Yoco, is about how quickly they've really stood up and taken this role. And one of the products that you've developed was the Small Business Recovery Monitor. And I think what I would like you to speak through is just first of all explain a little bit of context about where this comes from, and also just showing the real impact on small businesses over this period of time. And I'm just going to share screen quickly so you've got a bit of context.
Cool. Maybe to start off with, let me talk just for 3 seconds about who our customer is. So Yoco is South Africa's biggest mobile payments provider, mobile point of sale provider in payments. An equivalent comparison in Europe or the US would be iZettle or SumUp or Square. So we have a suite of products and business tools which really help small business start, run, and grow, which means we have data, small business related data, which is extremely relevant and extremely rare in a South African context as well. So we have 80,000 small business customers across the country. They stretch from micro to medium businesses, monthly turnovers of between sort of less than €1,000 a month to upwards of 15 to 20,000 euros a month. But they generally sit in the middle of that number. So they would be considered very small business generally in a European context, and they cover all the industries. We are particularly strong in retail, food and beverage, and health and beauty, but across the board, we have a lot of industries. And also just geographically, like a really nice spread across the country. So we do have the ability to provide data regarding how small business is doing. And this is data which is incredibly rare. So that's our customer. So I don't know if you have that graph, which you're going to put up there.
Put it up now. Perfect. This is it here. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the dramatic change that happened in a South African context. So I think for everyone who's not a South African, we were really first affected by COVID in the second week of March. That's when we had our first case, around about the 10th of March or so, but it was still business as usual. The government then announced on the 15th of March, the first of an upcoming series of lockdowns. At that stage, it was a sort of shelter in place request. And there was a request for people to start moving back to their homes, etc., from across the country. No real lockdown in place yet. And then on the 21st of March, the 22nd of March, the first lockdown was announced, and that it was coming 4 days later. So what you're looking at here is a graph of small business turnover across the country that we could get from our 80,000 point of sale devices across the country. And you see this precipitous drop off that happens as lockdown entered on the 22nd of March or 23rd of March or so. You also see a bit of an uptick prior to that period as people like filled their baskets and went to the shops and quickly tried to like get themselves sorted for lockdown. And then this gigantic drop. And I mean, small business turnover, you know, it's an incredibly important industry in South Africa, small business. It provides a disproportionate number of jobs, a disproportionate amount of commerce. So what you see here is really the collapse of a category and an industry in the space of a week. 95% down. So the numbers that we're referring to there are numbers versus the baseline, which was prior to COVID. So a number of 8%, which we hit on the 10th of March, tells you that small business turnover in South Africa was 8% of what it was in the period before the lockdown. So effectively 92% drop off. And then you slowly see a change and a slow recovery as we move from between B and C are level 5 lockdown in South Africa, which was the harshest lockdown. At C, we moved to level 4 lockdown, which is, well, a little bit more commerce allowed, a little bit more movement allowed, but still pretty strict in a European or US sense. And you can see the number of COVID cases on the graph as well, by the way, which have been slowly ticking up. And now we're at the point where we're about 56% down where we were before the lockdown happened. So it is the rapid, like almost collapse of the small business market in South Africa, and now the slow recovery is happening. And it's just great that we have the ability to provide this data. I mean, it's not readily available. The government has no data on this market. In particular, it's completely under-read. And, you know, very much built into our brand is the concept of transparency and openness. So we've decided to make this data available, and it gets updated every single day on a live dashboard, and you can literally watch recovery of small business in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Matt, it really is. I think Yoco has really stepped up to be able to be the voice of small business over this period of time. And I think we can't underplay how important this type of data is to be able to showcase the plight. And I think it has gone a long way in terms of really campaigning government to be able to look at and getting media exposure to be able to champion the cause of small businesses. And we have seen a little bit of loosening up. And, you know, hopefully it will continue in that vein. You know, I just wanted to, you know, I think sometimes when we look at graphs, it looks as if it's something that's happening to other people, but this is actually very much close to home in terms of reflecting our own businesses over here. And there are obviously people and businesses behind this graph. So it is really dramatic. I want to bring it a bit closer to home, Matt, to Yoco and Yoco business itself. Obviously, you know, standing over here on this where A was, I think Yoco at the time was, you know, you had one of the last, you know, consumer events or your client events over this period of time. And I mean, the trajectory for Yoco was really only looking at moving up from A. It was really, really strong. Take us back to this moment over here, as you, as brand manager of Yoco, sitting in this changed world. You know, what were your steps? How did you react to this situation?
Yeah, so I mean, that graph also relates to Yoco's revenue, right? Yeah. That's how we make our money. So, you know, the same way, never before have we been more closely aligned to our customers and their success. I think the reality was that, first of all, like, we weren't prepared. I'll be completely honest about that. We, as you mentioned, had a huge event. Our first major event was sort of 700 people, all-day conference for small business owners on the 14th of March, actually the day before the president announced all the measures that were coming up. So my team had been working flat out to pull this event off, and it was an incredible event, and the memories will last for a long time. I don't know when we'll next have any events, but like, I'm going to hold on to that day. Yeah. And literally woke up the next morning expecting to be able to take some time off, you know, think about what was happening next, and got hit by this train. So one thing which we weren't prepared for was the scale of the impact and the speed. I mean, we went from having, South Africa was one of the countries to lock down first. We had literally less than 40 cases and we locked down. So, and at that stage, we were still figuring out what kind of a beast this COVID was.
What does it mean?
So it was really a case of like, take a step back, first of all, and move into not a crisis comms mode, but certainly a place of like, let's move forward very tentatively here and not be tone deaf. And let's, thoughtfulness trumps speed, I think, in a crisis like this. And at that stage, we decided very quickly to put our customer like at the center of our response, because, we looked around and we said, well, actually, we don't have answers. Like we just genuinely don't have answers here. Mm-hmm. And also we needed to be really like tightly aligned to this crisis in terms of the world of our customers. So our initial response was all about saying, we don't have the answers. Let's co-create this thing together. You tell us what you need. We're going to put our resources against that. So we spent the first 5 days actually surveying our entire base. And we had an amazing response. We had like 7,000 or 8,000 customers telling us like how they were feeling and giving us suggestions. And then we also then did a lot of direct reach outs, literally phoning customers saying, hey, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling about this thing? What is it that you need right now? And it, in the end, came down to 3 things which were requested of us. The one was resources and knowledge. A lot of people were just confused. Yeah. The second one was community, like this clear sense of like, hey, I need a community of like-minded people to talk to now, because this is hard. Yeah. And then the third was products. Like, we are an in-person payment company. Our card machines are touch environments. When you're locked down, they're completely irrelevant, is the reality. So our customers were saying like, well, we need to shift to online, but you can't provide me with online payment solutions. Like, what do I do? Yeah. So, that third pillar was a very clear sense that we needed to pivot our products roadmap to be providing online payments as fast as possible, particularly in a world which was so uncertain, and we didn't know, and we still don't know how long this is sort of going to go on for, and whether there's going to be second or third waves, etc. But we know that the world's irrevocably changed, and therefore we had those 3 pillars as the central sort of tenets and foundations of our response plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've told you the story that I hopped onto one of your Facebook webinars that was held by a CEO. It was really one of the early days, and it was a very authentic, from the heart communication. And I know that there are a lot of brands that tend to wait for the exact right response before reaching out, and I think what really stood out for me is that there was immediately a sense of, we're in this together, and you could see that the community helping each other out and adding responses. And I remember at the time just feeling that's exactly what we need at the moment, is people having that authentic response. I think there's some of the other things that you have touched on or developed, Matt, that I think stood out for me over this period of time. And one of them was in terms of how you were trying to assist your consumer with information, as well as some of the vouchering systems that you put in place. Do you want to just touch on those briefly? Because I do think it was quite a swift reaction to Sure. Providing real solutions,
I mean, I think one thing to say is that when you are in a crisis like this, and going forward in sort of recession style marketing, you suddenly become incredibly reliant on your owned channels. So, with the drop in our revenue was an equivalent drop in marketing budget. We simply had to pull the brake up on it, which meant that whatever we did, we needed to do via our own channels. And because the request from our customers was knowledge, we went deep on our blog and content marketing. So we really developed a lot of content on an almost daily basis attached to what our customers were requesting. And have therefore seen a dramatic increase in the community that we have on that blog, which has been really amazing to see. And again, a lot of it was co-created. So we did it by speaking to customers, figuring out what their needs were on a Monday, and starting to create that content on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, quite literally. And one thing that came up early in the game was and we saw it elsewhere actually, was this concept of vouchers too. So the first thing we did is we created what we call the COVID guide to small business, and we've been building that every single week, build various foundations, like a lot of foundations around wellness and mental health, and a foundation around financial health, and then a lot of foundations around how do you continue doing marketing as a small business in a world of COVID as well. So a lot of stuff around that. And then the fourth was the pillars of product. And customers were saying to us, oh, actually, it would be a hell of useful to have a digital vouchering system where our current customers can still support us even though our doors are shut, by buying a gift voucher and then redeeming it at a later point. So this was never something which was on our product roadmap. I mean, we had, to be honest, had never really thought about it. And I think the value of working for a very agile tech company is that from one or two slacks between myself from a marketing standpoint and some of our customer sort of insights team to our engineering team, and all of a sudden a small pot of engineers were put aside to like figure out this vouchering thing. And in the space of a week, we could deliver a digital voucher, which was built into our application, built into our current ecosystem, and that a small business owner whose doors were shut could quite literally create digital vouchers at the push of a button and get people to purchase. And then we were like, okay, well, that's a great product, but we actually don't have a means for a lot of our customers to market that product. A lot of them aren't particularly savvy. Yeah. So we then had to figure out how to create a bit of a marketplace. So together with the product came a marketplace which we called supportsmall.coza, which was really a place where all of our customers who wanted to could, in 5 minutes, and also non-customers, sign up onto a central database. It's almost like you can find your local small businesses, and on that database it shows you, am I trading? If I'm not trading, I can buy a voucher directly off the marketplace or off the community, or I can direct people to my online website or whatever it is to try and help people. And then as soon as I'm trading again, a little flag comes up, hey, this person's now trading, go and support them in person. So those two things came hand in hand together, and one was a reskinning of something we had done previously, and one was brand new. But it was a great combination of almost a product-led response, even though it was triggered from a marketing need.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Matt, one of the things that is, because I think when we're looking at different industries, it's also important to look at lessons that people are able to replicate. And I think the one thing that stood out for me is about your, maybe obsession's a strong word, but a really focus on customer insights. I've seen that time and time again with Yoco. You start off with listening to what your customer wants. And, I know that we've done a brand tracker together. It almost seems that at every touch point, you're gauging yourself back on what the consumer needs and adjusting the business, which speaks to quite a high level of flexibility and agility, which is incredible, I think, and it comes through in terms of how you're responding at the moment. We had a chat earlier this week, and we were speaking about certain businesses that both of us had been in contact with that just haven't been able to move through this period. It's almost as if they're frozen and not knowing which direction to take. And I think one of the things that stood out for me about Yoco is that ability to be agile and to be able to respond quite quickly. Do you have any insight in terms of how do you do that? How is it possible? What is it baked in the company? What makes Yoco so able to adjust so quickly?
It's baked into our DNA. We are still very much startup mentality. That's how we work. We work in a very agile manner. I think, the reality with a lot of bigger companies is that their systems, their processes, their corporate structures don't allow for agility and rapid decision making. And even simple things like, when you combine that with the need to work remotely, talk about paralysis. It's really hard. Whereas we could work remotely, we had all the technology, we had the ways of doing it. We had sort of been working remotely a little bit anyway. So the switch to moving remote wasn't hard. And then we had all of the tech in particular that allowed for rapid collaboration. But I think, the one thing for me, which is extremely replicatable, is the importance of over communication in a crisis time like that. I mean, we went from holding a company all hands meeting once every 2 weeks to every single day, literally every single day. And from a leadership team perspective and a senior management point of view, every single morning, that's how we'd start our day, is that we would be assessing people where they were at. Like there's a lot of, humanity at Yoco in terms of like, there's a lot of very compassionate style leadership. So we had a big set of activities related to ensuring people's mental wellness. But beyond that, in terms of getting the work done, we just dramatically increased the communication flow. We made sure that people were organized in such a manner that communication was being transparently shared on a daily basis. Like, guys, this is where we're at. This is what's going on. This is the big focus point right now. And I think that really results in agility. And a lot of people have sort of meeting. They don't want to have more meetings than are necessary. Like actually in this kind of time, like meetings are very productive. They tend to like get stuff closely aligned, teams moving in the right direction really rapidly. So that's one thing for me that I think is helpful. The other thing is that we're a business that's used to working under constraints. I mean, we are still a venture-backed business. We have constraints from a resource standpoint, from a budget standpoint. We just have a lot of constraints. And like, you can either see constraints as being like, you're paralyzed by constraints, or constraints are a little bit freeing actually. And it's quite nice to have, like, and I call it like, it's a beautiful constraint. Like that kind of thing does exist. And we work well under constrained environments actually. And it's the kind of people that we employ and the kind of work that we like doing. So all of those things together.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that stood out for me when we were working together on some of the projects was about the level of interest from everyone at Yoco. Whether we were speaking to the person implementing the pixel, they were disproportionately interested into what the end product was going to be. And I think there is some freedom in terms of an empathetic leadership as well. You're not constrained by fear. And I think fear can sometimes really be debilitating for a lot of companies when people don't feel they have the ability to ask the question and, get the bigger picture. So, I mean, I think that's something that's quite commendable. I have got another 20 questions I want to ask you, but I see that we're already cutting quite close to time. So I just want to open up the questions a bit. So one of the anonymous questions that we've got has just popped up here. What have you learned about your customers that you didn't know in the past weeks?
Oh, that is a great question, actually. So, I mean, I think one thing which we've learned is that we sometimes looked at our customers as a small business owner. They're all small business owners. What this crisis has really forced us to do is become much tighter on industry differences. Like, because industries are opening up at different times and are facing different challenges at different times, I have found it really fascinating to go really deep by industry and to really unpack, like, what does someone who's sitting in a food and beverage industry need right now versus someone that's sitting in retail or health and beauty? And that's been really, really important for us, is that we've had to go really deep into our customer segments. And I think that the truth is that our customers themselves have been going through this, it's like almost the multiple stages of grief, to be honest. And many of them in some industries are still in that sort of denial paralysis phase in the middle. So we've learned a lot about the mindset of a small business owner, about, the kind of triggers that help with confidence. A lot of small business owners simply lack confidence. They feel alone. They feel very much like they're taking on the world, and the world's on their shoulders, and they're often the people that, the buck stops with them. And the vital importance of connecting small business owners with each other, because, that sort of fairly fragile state of confidence has been smashed by this. And they don't have 30 or 40 other people to be talking to on a daily basis and to be seeing how we're doing. They're feeling quite alone. So that's been quite an eye-opener for me.
Yeah. I think you're right with that. I think more than ever, there is that sense of community. I wanted to touch a little bit on because I don't want to lose this thought, because we haven't spoken much about the recovery. And I know that one of the campaigns that Yoco was really spearheaded, which, if you look, I think it was a December season time for us in South Africa, was really about Shop the Streets, which was a big campaign to be able to get consumers to be able to encourage them to buy local. And I mean, now when we look at that, it's so critical to recovery, that message. You know, are there plans for Yoco to be able to reintroduce that type of messaging going forward? It was part of recovery.
Yeah, we actually joked the other day to say it's no longer shop the streets, it's shop the tweets. That's kind of what you can do nowadays. I mean, the concept is extremely relevant, more than ever. And in fact, local is all we've got for a little while. And I think there's something quite, you know, we've lost a lot in this fire over the last 2.5 months. It's been disastrous. No one hasn't been touched by it, but we've also going to gain some interesting things out of it. And I think one thing which perhaps we'll walk away from and look back on is the fact that the movement from like globalization being the end goal. Everything must be global. Brands must be global. Companies must be global. You know, to actually local is pretty damn great. You know, I was talking like anecdotally. There's a small deli that up the road from me here in Cape Town, and I think I've walked past that deli 100 times. You know, I've never noticed it before. Yep. Now I know that guy. I know him. Like, he's a great guy. We've had a lot of long conversations. I buy from him on a weekly basis to support him. I've suddenly, like, my eyes have been opened to the vital importance of like local business. And although, you know, my job is to be the voice of small business, I think sometimes I haven't lived that, if I'm honest with you. And there is something fabulous about the need to like really support your local businesses. So yeah, we've got some stuff planned. We do see ourselves more as a voice than a brand. And I think that we need to champion this local cause going forward. So maybe not shopping on the streets that much. Well, if you are, you're shopping on the streets with a mask and with sanitizer, but certainly supporting local is something that we want to get behind more than ever.
Yeah. There are a lot more questions, but I actually want to end off with the following question. And both of us are parents, so you probably know the kids' game, Would You Rather, which is which they like to use. So I'd like to end it with a Would You Rather, but adult version of that game. If we have to look back now on of these hard lessons, do you think you would choose the business to return how it was pre-COVID? Or do you feel that the lessons that you've learned and the changes that you've made in the business at the moment is actually built a better business?
Yeah, I think that some smart people, I think it was Bain or McKinsey or someone, did a study that said that coming out of recessions, about 10% of companies come out of recessions stronger than they were prior to the recession, actually. And I think that Yoco will be one of that 10%. And I think that what we have learned over the last 2 months, on the softer side, what we have learned about our culture as a business and how we've come together over this period has been nothing short of incredible to witness. So I think our culture is stronger than ever. And, you know, that doesn't go away. I think, you know, in times of like genuine crisis, your culture either fragments or it gets stronger, and ours has got stronger. And I think that's been really amazing to witness. And then we are rapidly shifting into a much more product-led company, a company where the engineers and the developers and the product teams are now at the forefront of what we're doing. And as a marketing team, you know, we've had to take a step back and allow the smart people in product to drive the agenda. And I think therefore we'll come out of this even stronger. As a brand, I think that I hope we come out of it stronger. I think that we are navigating it as best as we can, and we remain. It's important for us to continue to be constantly agile, constantly pivoting. I think the one thing which is interesting is that the planning timelines have reduced so substantially. I mean, I used to plan on an annual basis. I used to force my team to do 1 year brand planning, 3 big campaigns in a year. Like, let's like do less, better, big, bold stuff. Now we're planning on a weekly basis, and we're trying to figure out on a weekly basis what we need, what our customers need. And therefore there's a lot that's changed, but I've learned a lot in that process too. So Yoco will come out stronger, I'm pretty sure.
Thanks so much, Matt. We are out of time, but I certainly thank you for sharing. I think it does speak to transparency and the nature of Yoco that you are so willing to be able to share the information and learnings that you've had. I know from us at DCMN, we are very big champions of Yoco and the brand, and do strongly believe that you are building everything right to be able to succeed going forward. So best of luck, and thank you for your time today. Thanks to everyone that joined us. And if anyone is interested, I know that the next ScaleUp event is going to be hosted back in Europe, in Berlin office, headed up by Julian, looking at the gaming industry. So if anyone's got an interest in that, please look out for the invite. Thanks so much. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Natasha. Cheers, DCMN.